Hey Dara, how are you?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. And where are you talking to us from? Looks like you're in a bedroom.
Um, I'm in my bedroom in London. Yeah, and I guess you're in your place in London as well.
Exactly, so not so far away. You're probably one of the closest interviewees we've had on Screen Time, sponsored by Enscape. Dara, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
So I'm an architect and I have a practice called Design House Liberty in London, and we also have a satellite office in Hong Kong. Well, you'll kind of see what I do because I made you guys a nice little presentation. But we work across all asset classes and focusing on architecture, interiors, and design.
And we've done loads of talks together, haven't we? I'm trying to think the last one was
Oh my gosh.
Dubai. Our travel days are over temporarily, but we were on a panel together in Dubai, which was
Yes.
funny because I think it was your idea to flip the panel. So they all started asking questions.
It was funny because literally like just last night, I was thinking about all the panels we'd been on together, from like Shanghai to Dubai to Czech Republic to Prague. And I was just thinking how much fun it's been traveling with you and, being on stage and like the banter that we have. We also did the Dulux. It's been fun. It's been a lot more than I actually realized.
Well, I'm sorry we're not in some glamorous location. We're stuck in our bedrooms.
This is
Each other.
the most glamorous location. It's the first time we've ever had a virtual talk, and I don't know. I kind of like it. I think that's kind of the irony of it, huh?
Definitely no jet lag involved, but we should maybe start a double act after this. Hit the.
Yeah. Exactly, exactly.
So, so tell us, how are things going for you? You say you have an office in China or Hong Kong. Has that picked up? Are things back open as normal over there?
Yeah. So I actually added that in my presentation as well. I kind of wanted to give a kind of a I guess I'm getting a lot of messages and DMs from different designers asking about business and what's going on and how we're going to find clients or what we're going to design differently. A lot of the concerns I'm getting are more around, I think, fear of pipeline. And so I want to be like quite transparent about it. And I kind of show where our current projects are, where our inquiries are coming from, and the contracts that we signed during COVID, where they're from, just to give like a little snapshot of just how, our small practice is doing. I don't know about the rest of the world.
And you say you have a small practice, so tell us a little bit about your office setup. How many people do you have? How many of them in Europe? How many of them in Asia?
Yeah, so the practice always fluctuates between, let's say, 20 and 30 people. Right now, we're just about 20. We're all in London. We have a few people in Asia. And, with COVID, we definitely did. Uh, we didn't actually have to fire anybody, which was nice. But there are some projects that were winding down, so we did let some people go with the end of some projects. We did furlough a few of our staff, so it's in flux. I think the whole business structure right now is how to become more operationally savvy, so to say. So yeah.
We just rolled out of bed, by the way. You've got a cup of tea there, and you were still getting dressed earlier.
Yeah, it's true. I think that ever since I was an architecture student, I've been like set on night owl mode. So I'm like naturally a night creature. I'm not really great in mornings. This is actually, yeah, I can't believe it's like 2 p.m. And this cup of coffee and this little cup of chia is like the first thing I've eaten all day.
Well, you're missing a wonderful day outside. I was just in the garden, having a snack in the garden. It's really
I
hot.
know. Incredibly ironic that London weather is now like glowing and we're all inside. But actually, I live right next to the park, so I have been outside and I've been riding my bike, and it's been really nice.
So tell us about the kind of projects you work on then. What kind of stuff do you do?
Yeah, so I thought that, so I did a little presentation and I talk about how the projects that we did actually changed with what we were presented. And so there's been a lot of social, economic, and political flux happening basically our entire existence as a practice. They just have never been as big as COVID. So that it's never been like an issue of discussion. But as a young designer where, essentially I was never funded, I had no investors, and I personally didn't have any money either, or I didn't have any fancy parents with money to give me. I had to basically do what the market was like asking me to do. And that was our way of kind of funding ourselves, funding our projects and growing as a practice. So it's kind of, I'm just kind of looking at a way of like how we can ease ourselves into certain markets. So what we do as a practice are not things that I didn't write a business plan and set out to do certain things. It was more just like how to be young and agile and kind of work with what's given to you. So right now we do, it's kind of funny. We do a mixed bag of things, and I'm not saying this in a proud way. I think I should be more focused in a lot of ways, but we do architecture, we do urban, we do wayfinding, landscape, interiors, products. We're going into furniture. So I really think that we are mostly all architects, but with a big focus on design and design impact.
You keep talking about your presentation. Why don't you just show us the presentation and it will all be
Okay, I'm sorry. I can answer a lot of these questions. So let's see, I have to screen share, right?
Yeah, fire it up.
Okay, I'm very sorry for the cheesy title, but I didn't really know how to call it. So I called it Proactive Reaction, which is agility through a changing world. And what we're going to do, or not what we're going to do, I don't know what we're going to do, but how my practice has dealt with being agile. So one thing, just I guess as a professional, the two words that have always influenced me a lot is impact and innovation. And so whatever project we do, I always get really excited about the idea of how to insert those two words. And I've always been really interested in social, economic, and political happenings, not because I'm so in tune with the news or government, but because it has a direct impact and it has a direct correlation to my business simply because we work institutionally. So that's with funds and developers, where if you're working privately or with privately funded project, it wouldn't be as impactful. So I'm lucky that we've been young enough to shift our services towards demand. And it's not something, like I was saying, it's not something that's just happening this year. It's definitely something that has happened every single year of my business. And so every time the word uncertainty is in the property market, it becomes a lot more cautious. And in a way, the market is generally driven by people, and people drive demand. And I just think that if, as designers, if we can just remember this simple tool, people drive demand, I feel like we can angle what we do in a much more direct way. I'll show examples of this later. Sorry if it sounds a little bit confusing. So just to give you an example of what my business traditionally does is I've created a company which has become a physical platform in order to get in front of the right opportunities, which is like my clients, funds, and developers, to be able to fund these ideas. And so I always had to speak in a language they understood, which is design adds value, or design adds money, basically. And I would call this a proactive, reactive approach. And what I mean by that is a proactive approach for a designer is if you're to say, I thought of something, I've created it, and I'm going to put it out there and see who bites. And I've done this before, and it was tough because I couldn't necessarily find a funder, and I would always get that it was too ahead of its time. And then there's a reactive approach, which is where you wait till the market needs something, they approach you, they'll pay you for it, and then you deliver it. And in a way that's bad because then you don't always make or design things that you basically want to do because you're constantly answering what somebody wants. So what I've subconsciously done, and I hadn't realized it, was I proactively create a list of everything that I want to do in my career and everything that I want to do as a designer. And then I wait and then the reactive approach is I wait till somebody comes to me and I connect that with something on my list. And then I pitch that, because a lot of reaction comes from is it's all about like timing and it's all about demand. And so that's in a way, I mean, I hope my clients are watching, but they were kind of guinea pigs for things that I wanted to do. And I think the beautiful thing about today in technology is that we no longer have to create these physical platforms and go out to the institution. When we have this simple gadget, we have a direct access to an open market. So we can, I think it's just a great time for startups right now because they no longer need any like basically funding or ideas. They have all their PR, their marketing, their comms team like right in the palm of their hand. I think, again, as designers, if we're more in tune with market opportunities that are happening with what's going on today, we can really take advantage of this. So right now, I think it's the most critical time more than ever that we start to erase the boundaries between supply and demand, or what I'll call design and people. And we really, I think right now, need to find a way to make design relatable. So instead of becoming this esoteric or kind of elitist subject, we need to, if we want to like create impact with people, we need to communicate in a way that's easier to understand. Just like how when I was working institutionally, I always had to speak in terms they understood, which was design adds value. I feel like today designers need to speak in a way people understand, which is how design adds trust. So like I was telling you, I've structured this presentation to show you how almost every single year as a business, we've had to change our offerings to the market because we've had a very, reactive or let's say proactive reactive approach to how we've done this. But none of these events have been as big as COVID. So I thought that if I just showed micro examples of how we've been agile through the years, that as a collective, we can, think of some solutions. So very quickly, without trying to bore you, I have like 5 examples of projects. The first one is in 2013. It was the first year in business. It was just myself. I wanted to create an installation, and I'd always been really inspired by organic forms, such as rain, such as rocks in nature, and the way that it puddles and has all these variations. And the way I found my client for that, because I get asked a lot how I find my clients, is they're actually just friends. And I convinced a friend of mine who was building a new flat that he needed an installation in his New York penthouse, obviously, and it needed to be huge. And I didn't charge him very much for it, if anything at all. I just charged him for the development of the prototype, which then got on Pinterest. And again, I just want to highlight the beauty of technology is that we no longer need to hire PR companies, and we don't need to hire, I'm not trying to offend PR companies. I love them. I'm just saying we can be our own marketeers. So when this got on Pinterest and went viral, that is like a huge tool for designers. A lot of interior designers are using Pinterest as inspiration. And so we got into all these great projects like the Four Seasons, Waldorf Astoria, Hilton, airports, churches, and it's been a really, really great business for us. We also do all the Cartiers worldwide. So our recurring clients are super important. It's our healthiest business. We sell B2B, which took us a while to figure out, but we know our margins, we have very little risk, and that's super hard in the design service. So somehow diversifying and using technology, we're able to open up a new market within our services that really helps with the cash flow. And I'm just being really transparent because I don't think that a lot of people do talk about business and design a lot. So I was having dinner with a friend, and he was a very successful entrepreneur in a health, basically a health supplement business. And I asked him, how do you launch your next product? And he said, well, obviously I use Google Trends. And I was like, oh, obviously. And so he'll search what people are interested in. And in COVID, it's been things like keto, vegan, all sorts of keywords. And whatever is hitting on the trends, he'll put out blogs and he'll launch that product. And he already knows it's going to be successful just due to the hit rates. And I thought, well, why don't designers do more of this? So I just quickly put in, what's the Google trend happening within the last 3 months? And it might have changed because I did this a few days ago, but there's almost an 800% increase in the search for Avios design, which is the design of airplane seating. Also, if you look in the UK, the top hits right now is outdoor furniture and fire pits. And then I thought kind of a clever thing was somebody sent me, on the bottom right here, you see a hand sanitizer, a designer hand sanitizer. So just showing you some proactive and reactive designs that are coming out. In 2015, 2016, Brexit hit. And for the first time, there was a huge slowdown in the luxury residential sector. So all of a sudden, all these residential developers had to start offering turnkey solutions. And even though I had never done it before, they're all of a sudden coming to us and asking us to get into interiors. And so I'm an architect, and by my second year, I was getting all these interior projects. And I had no idea what to do. It's a completely different logistics. We got into it, we taught ourselves, and I can still remember our first project. The developer walks in and he goes, well, what color are the walls? And we all looked at each other, a bunch of architects were like, well, of course they're white, obviously. And he was just kind of like, okay. But no, it's actually the project on the top left. It obviously came out really well. And we've had a plethora of experience since then. And we have an incredible portfolio built off of the business of interiors. And I think what I learned from this project was that the revenues you can generate from interiors are, in my experience, more profitable than architecture, because you're in controlled environments. They're very quick, and you have very comparable fee structures. Plus you have procurement, which you don't really have in architecture, because it's mostly procured by a contractor. So off of Brexit, we opened up a whole new stream of business that we didn't do before. Now in 2016, 2017, we started to see the fall of the office market, and this change was really due to technology. So technology made workplaces smaller footprint. So there's a lot more remote working. The tech sector was growing, which means you needed more creative spaces. And the serviced office space totally changed the world's view on our concept on the length of leases. So office leases went from a single big tenant taking a whole building, wanting like a 10 to 20-year lease, to a lot of smaller tenants taking different part of the buildings that were creative, and they wanted short leases. So all of a sudden we had a ton of developers come up to me and say, we're about to finish our building and we don't have the entire thing leased and we don't know what to do. So I went through this. I mean, I must have designed at least 20 different office spaces since then, just because the market was demanding that. And it's not that I want to be a communal office space designer. It's because I was very keenly interested in understanding people and how the office market was moving. And I like the ideas of creating brands. I love creating brands. It's one thing I'm super passionate about. And I like the fact that I was taking an otherwise soulless building and slapping a concept on it, and then materializing that through the environment. So, of course, the workspace is constantly in flux. It's still in flux. I saw your post this morning, completely agree with you. A lot of workspaces about wellness, soft space, mixed use spaces, lights. And then in 2018, so one of my proactive lists that I've always wanted to do was create an office in China or, in the Far East. But I didn't actually know how to do that because, like I said, I didn't have the right opportunities. So I literally waited 6 years to finally be approached by a client who found us in London to take us to China. And it's been, everything we go into, we never had experience in. I never had experience in interiors. I never had experience in offices. Well, I did maybe for my previous jobs, but not even so much. A lot of it was kind of learning on the go and just asking the right questions. When I started a business in China, it's been, I am also very optimistic. So for me, it's been amazing. It's been a joyride. I absolutely loved it. I took the opportunity of always flying in there and also seeking to see where else we could use our design services. And so in the midst of all this adversity, the retail was in a huge crux, especially in China. People were no longer going to brick and mortar stores. And instead of people fearing that and backing off, they still had to sell their products. So they started pouring investments into redesigning brick and mortar retail spaces. And so then it was up to us to create these user experience, these digital connections, totally rebranding them. So right now we have 3 different brands and a total of 1,200 stores being built across China. And I think that what I experienced in China, which I find completely overwhelming, is the speed and the capacity and the scale that they can build at. So if you look at this retail store that was built in a warehouse, they did this end to end in 30 days, which I find like fascinating. So was my hunch to build an office in China correct? I really don't know the answer to that, but I do know that like it's always the strongest economies that will always kind of topple out. And they're saying the same things right now about corporate and SMEs. And so in a way, if you look at our contracts since February 2020, 80% of them have come from China and Hong Kong. 20% of them have come from Europe, thankfully Italy. And if you look at our inquiries, a lot of them are coming from the Far East. Our current contracts really divided between Europe, Middle East, and Asia. It was really 50-50. And right now it seems like Asia is just pulling up a bit ahead. What I learned from COVID was that 70% of your work can come from your existing clients. It's not like you're trying to change the contract on them. You're simply trying to just see if they have any interest in extending their scopes. And of course, it's completely up to them. But that is how we've gotten a lot of these new contracts. Also, I think that right now I feel like businesses, and this is just a personal opinion, are kind of safe because we're in the middle of tailing off, our existing pipeline, our existing contracts, or signing on new contracts. But if you looked at that graph I showed earlier, you can see that our economy is taking this like straight down blade dip right now. And I feel like a lot of these pains might be felt maybe a bit later on. So let's say in 2021, we certainly as a business are just so much more cautious in what we're doing. So we've restructured the company, we've cut off loose ends, we've tightened our operations, and we're certainly more commercially minded going forward. Just one last example, very quick. At the end of tailing off Brexit, the luxury residential market was still super hard. So at the end of 2019, we were supposed to launch this brand new development with a client. It was our first brand ID tower, residential tower with SOM as the shell and core. And I'm super proud of it. I love it. And I know that I wouldn't have had this opportunity if the market was super buoyant. So I'm just trying to illustrate how adversity creates opportunity. And you just need to find a way to position yourself to kind of take advantage of that. I think that with like COVID, I saw the connection with people at home and their depletion of mental health. So I used to kind of stray away from talking about things that were too intimate, like curtains or like, let's say, throw pillows. But actually, I think that these small moves that we can make as designers have an incredible impact. If we just think about the end user and what they want. So we shouldn't be shy of trying to connect with people. And this is my last slide, which is to say that I think we're in a situation right now where there's a lot of fear and anxiety and kind of the unknown. So the question is, what is next? And I think that there's this design is not just a physical barrier, but it's a mental barrier as well to make people feel like they're in a safe zone, even if we don't know if masks works, or we don't know if when the grocery store makes these shields, if they work, they at least mentally give us that security. So right now we're working complete backwards instead of trying to find how to create maximum capacity within buildings, because we've always been, we've always been shoveled that like square footage is how real estate is valued. We're actually trying to unthread this all and start to design spaces that make people feel safe to go to, not just maximizing their bottom line, but even just to get people to go, which is a completely different way of designing. So it's not about spatial efficiency, it's about spatial trust right now. So yeah, that's pretty much the end. Thank you for the patience and the cutoff with the phone. I think right now we're facing like the biggest challenge in the world that we've ever seen. So how do we take this proactive reaction to what we're seeing, and how do we as designers take away fear and create opportunity? So it's just exciting because there's so much talent around. But I also just want to emphasize that there is a commercial aspect to everything that we do, and we can't ignore the market. We can't ignore demand. We can't ignore people. We got to think back to what do people want, not what do we want, and what's our social responsibility in all of this. So that's it.
Thanks, Dara. Well, it's definitely never boring with you around.
I know.
I'm back. I'd lost myself then.
I'm really sorry. Were you talking to yourself for a while?
Well, you froze, but I was messaging Callum to see what we could do about it, because that's actually the first time we've lost someone on this.
I know.
But you're back. We're good. You said at some point that that architects don't like to talk about business very much, but your report was peppered with business terms like margins and cash flow, and the classic. You talk about design adding value, but what that really means is design adding money. So do you think that architects should be a bit more upfront about the fact that they're running businesses?
No, I mean, yes, the short answer to that is yes, but I also don't really blame them, because we're not geared and we're not brought up and we're not watered to think this way. And a lot of architecture is very right-minded. So it's not our nature it's almost like shameful to say we want to make money. You know what I mean? And I guess I'm just like, at the end of the day, it's like, if we want to make something happen, don't get me wrong. I love, I mean, I still do it myself. Speculative work, we do it all the time. We love, I mean, we just submitted a port terminal in Saudi, you know? So like, we're so passionate about things that may or may not happen. But the reality is, it's like, it is a business. And so we do have a cash flow responsibility to our staff, to ourselves, to the business. And so we do need to make that work in whatever capacity we do. And we still need to pursue our dreams at the same time. So I just want to bring a reality to it, because there's so many talented people out there, and it breaks my heart not to see every idea flying off the shelf, and it's just some simple tweaks in the mechanism in which they present something can go from an idea to a reality, you know? So I just think that being a really young startup myself, like I said, I didn't have any money doing this. It was literally like project to project. So then I get asked a lot, like, oh, how did you create a company? How did it grow so quickly? How did you do certain things? I just wanted to share that.
It seems to me like that what you've managed to do is find opportunities where other people might have said, this is what we do. And the client says, yeah, but we need someone who could do interiors. And they'd say, well, that's not me, or call this person. You're like, yeah, I can do that.
I mean, that's totally fair. I totally respect people who stick to their guns. And, you know, I've spoken to a lot of architects about this, and even myself, like if I want to change sectors right now, it's always a little bit more difficult, but you have to then, once you build a platform, you then need to like find a direction and stick to it and go with it. I just think that because I was so young and like desperate, I was just like, I'll do anything, you know, and I love design. I just love it. And it doesn't matter if it's like a fork or a building. Like, I love the whole process of it. So I think another key thing to this whole story is the ability to sell something. Like, why should they hire me to do something that I've never done before, right? And so a lot of that also is something that I don't think architects are really trained up to do. And that was one thing I mentioned in my presentation, is connecting the dots. Like, who are your contacts and how do you reach out to them and why would they want something? And the ability to then sell them like your capabilities, even if you haven't done it yet, which is still something that I have to do for future projects. There's tons of stuff I want to do that I haven't even touched upon, and it's a slow climb. So it doesn't happen overnight.
There's tons of things you want to do, and there's obviously tons of opportunity of examples of when a client has wanted something that you've never done before and you've offered it. But do you say no to things? Have people come to you and you said, you know what, that's too boring, or I'm scared of doing that, or I'm a better person? Where do you draw the line?
I definitely am not scared. I probably should be more scared. So, we've been offered to do bridges, entrances to cities, and I'm just like, yeah, we can do that. I've never personally done a bridge design, but I was like, of course I can do that. So in terms of being scared, no. But in terms of saying no, yes, we do say no. And usually it's simply because the project is too small or doesn't have, maybe it's the wrong client, or maybe it just doesn't have enough, like the fee's not big enough, just to be totally honest. And for that, we have tons of designer friends, and we'll ask them, we'll say, would you like this project? We're transparent about the fee, we're transparent about the scope. And then if they want it, they'll give it to us. But also that happens top down as well. So I've had Bjarke introduce me to a client because he wanted a house that was too small for him to do. And I'm like, I'll take it, And I think it was actually, it was his business that actually taught me that a lot of our work comes from other architects. And I never thought about that before. But I constantly give work to other designers, and I constantly get work from other designers. And I thought that what's amazing is to never see us as competition, that we're totally proponents of each other. And it's all about, I think it's about creating a synergetic, almost like karmatic circle, where we end up like giving and getting at the same time. And so there is no such thing as competition, and it's all about just what we can do for each other. I think that's really important.
And you mentioned about pursuing a design dream. So what is your dream job, or where do you want to end up as a designer? Say in 10 years time, 15, 20 years time, when, which is the age that most architects make it, let's be honest. Where do you see yourself, and what would you like to be doing?
I feel like I should ask you that.
No, you did that last time. I'm not doing that again.
That was fun though. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I have a bit of an entrepreneur syndrome, which is that we're never quite happy with what we've done, right? Like we always want more somehow, or maybe once we've done something, so I think that that question has definitely changed with, let's say, age and lifestyle. And I can say that I want something, but actually, like, the older I get, the more I realize that I want less. I want more, but less. So an example of this is I used to think that having a really great practice meant you had more people working for you. But obviously, as you and I both know, that's not it. Actually, it means if you're a lot more efficient with a tighter group, that you get a higher profit margin. And so it depends. And I said this to somebody who asked me on Instagram. I said, it depends on how you define success. If your definition of success is, let's just say, making more money, then you got to tighten your operations. If your definition of success is having a huge practice, then you need to grow your pipeline and hire more people because you need more resources. If your definition of success is, hang out with no office, then that's fine as well. So I think for me in 5 years, it's really hard to answer that because my definition of what I think is successful has really changed. And I think with COVID, I've learned that I really like working from home and not traveling. I'm really like having a really calm life, which is going to change, obviously, probably by next month. So still an answer that's in flux, isn't it?
You talked about the lighting project that you said it went viral on Pinterest, but did that go viral on its own? You just put some pictures on Pinterest and then it took off, or did you have to sort of seed that and work the social media side of things?
No, so I mean, when I started in 2013, you have to remember that like Instagram didn't really exist. It existed, but it wasn't what it was today. And so what did it mean to put something virally? I think that one thing we did very early on was we got whatever we did always got a lot of interest from media, and I don't even know how they found us to be quite honest. But somehow they would find us, and then they would write a blog on it, and then designers would pin it from their blogs. And so I did not put it on Pinterest. That was not like a route to business plan. That was just by pure coincidence and accidents, and maybe it was a little bit about timing as well. It was just that I just found it so fascinating that people can spend so much money on marketing, but today you can just stick something on Pinterest and then it'll multiply itself. And before you know it, there's about 1 million tags on it. And that's how it infiltrated the market. And I was thinking maybe as designers, we need to kind of take advantage of these small technological findings in a more systematic way than what we're doing, which was we spend most of our time creating and thinking about it rather than how to market it or how to even freely market it on the digital sphere, you know?
So how do you do your marketing then? Do you sort of cold call companies or go up to people at parties? How do you get these clients? How do you get these projects?
Clients are marketing because I see them as two different things. Like one might lead to one, but it's not actually the same. So do you mean how do I get clients or how do I get marketing?
How do you find the work that you do? Because obviously what's different about you from most architects is you're very entrepreneurial, you're very charismatic. So to you in a way are the brand. So I'm just wondering, like, do they email you and say, hi, we'd like a presentation, or do you just like go straight up to them at a party and say, hi, you need to work with me?
Thanks, Marcus. I think you know me.
I guess is the question.
You know me too well. I think that there's a few tips to remember. Like one is to not be shy. I think it's very easy for us to be shy about what we do or who we are, but I was taught very early on, you're your own advertiser. So if you are an event, then you certainly should go up to people and just introduce yourself. And you know, there's always like this tacky etiquette of like, do you hand people business cards? I think that designers just need to be a lot more forthright and not being shy about handing out a business card. And I think people would be surprised on how well that it's actually received, because a lot of these events, people are standing there with a drink and kind of staring at each other. They do want to like talk to each other. So yes, one is events. Two is just I do travel a lot. I do meet a lot of people. When I fly into a new city, we do look up the top developers within that city and we make a list and we do write an email and find out who we know within that company and if we can meet up and have a chat. So you could say that maybe that's just like a cold call method approach. And then three is, I guess in London, it's easy to get inbound because we're entrenched in the property market. So a lot of people know who we are and then they come and they ask for things. But in new markets like Asia, where people don't know us yet and we're not entrenched in the market, it's a combination of who we know, where we're gonna go, asking them to introduce us to people, asking them to introduce us to people, and constantly like being on kind of a business development run. So it's really being about like proactive in going out there and seeking it yourself, and then making the contacts and connections and then connecting them to other people as well. And actually that's, I think the key thing is that when you meet somebody, always make sure you listen to what they want and need, because if you can feed them back something that they want, then it'll get them to come to you again for something else, if that makes any sense. So it's not always about I don't always go there being like, oh, I want a job, I want something. I go there saying like, are you looking for a site? Do you need a developer for this? I heard you just started a company. I have some great freelancers I use that I can recommend to you. So you got to like somehow create interest and not always seem like a wanter, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I've seen that in action from you. And in fact, you've done that with Dezeen as well. You'll say, oh, you should meet so-and-so, and you've introduced me to someone, and then there's nothing in it for you, but it's just part of a network.
It's natural. I almost like can't even turn it off. It's like, I don't like doing it. It's like, if I genuinely think that it's a benefit for two parties, like I have to like genuinely believe it. So like, I don't take fees. I don't like that. It's a bit tacky. But I like the idea of like the people I work with, even on an institutional level, it's all about trust. And once they trust you and you open up your other friends of trust to them, it becomes like a small community, and it's just nice, you know?
And you talked about how you've kind of pivoted your business according to market demand. You talked about how after Brexit, the luxury real estate market changed, so you had to adapt. And you did touch on this, but coronavirus, what is the real estate market expecting is going to change about, I mean, offices, for example, and any kind of public space? What do you think, how do you think that will change the spaces that people like you will be designing in 3 months, 6 months, a year or more?
It's a really good question. I think the thing that people are wondering is this like a short-term thing or is this a long-term thing? And just to kind of put it into perspective, if we look at history, right, let's just say the Spanish flu, more people died from the second wave of it than the first wave of it. And if you look at the ratio of when someone gets just a regular flu, it's 1 to 3 or 1 to 4. But with coronavirus, the spread rate was, by the time you've met your 10th person, 59,000 people had been infected. So what we're looking at is an infection rate of something that is completely undetermined. I think what's interesting right now is if you go out in London, it's almost as if people have forgotten that it even existed, you know? And to some extent, I talk a lot about trust because I think that people don't know what to trust. They don't know whether to trust government and regulations or to trust, you know, what they're being told on TV or what to trust. But one thing that I have seen that's effective is they seem to trust like mental barriers, which is something I was briefly talking about. So like if someone's wearing a mask or there's like a shield between you and the driver, or if there's like shields in a grocery store, whether or not they're effective, it was more like how to design, build trust. So I think that sorry for the long-winded answer. For the short term, I think design is all about how we're gonna move things like furniture. And, you know, in grocery store, you see them like partitioning aisles, or you see offices right now. We've got, you know, people coming up with office plans, putting in 50% people, creating more lounge space, whatever. But I think in the long run of things, there's definitely gonna be a change in the way that we design to really rethink the way that we've been conglomerating or socially interacting. And I don't necessarily think that means our garden squares are gonna be like partitioned off or anything. I think it's more just like a conscious connectivity between design, how it's operationally being used, what are the safeguards around it to make it feel safe, and how that pans out over, you know, for me, I can be on a project for 7 years. So how that pans out over the next few years, it's really interesting to see. I think what I really want to see is how the property market is going to react to this in terms of if they're still going to be developing, calculating on square footage the way they've always been, or if they're going to be a lot more open-minded about the concept of design and personal space and safety.
Well, that was actually my question.
Yeah, I know. I guess my answer is like, I don't know. I really don't know.
I was talking to somebody yesterday who was talking about the implication of lifts, for example, because if you work in a building where you can't walk up, you need to go in a lift. And of course, that means you need to be close to people, so they need to control access to the lift. And he was saying that they'd calculated that in their building, people might need to queue for an hour and a half to be able to get into the lift. So suddenly you might see buildings that are more than 3-5 stories that you can't walk up becoming less desirable. Fortunately, we're on the 3rd floor in our office, so most of us it's not a problem. But then you have accessibility and, you know, wheelchair users and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. But yeah, and simultaneously, we've seen how remote working has also been really effective in how we run an office. So I guess, like you said in your Instagram post, and also I did it too, we got our IT to then spruce up its capacity for remote server working, which has been nice. And, you're talking about getting rid of your office. And I actually thought about that too. But then I came up to the same conclusion as you a week ago, which was that we still need a place we call home,
You keep referring to my Instagram post, and that was because yesterday I had to go.
It was so good.
I had to go into the office for the first time in 2 months because on the weekend I spilled coffee over my computer. So I had to go and find a spare one. And it was coincidentally the day that we decided as a company to renew our lease after talking about it in the senior management team for 2 months.
I know.
Going back to that space made me realize that we'd made the right decision because of all the kind of things that are unimportant to the business mission, but are really important to people that happen in an office, like that you play and what happens on people's birthdays and the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
It's
so true.
Place where they put their coats and all those little kind of things that actually you start to miss when you're
Oh, totally.
And it was my most popular Instagram post I've ever put up. I
think it was really good.
We've got a couple of questions for you, Dara, before we finish up. Steph asks, what's the best way to improve architectural design skills and get more commissions?
What does she mean by skills? Because there's the design skills itself, and then there's the commission skills, and they are two completely different skills. And I think as well as anybody that runs a business, that the people you put in front of people are not necessarily the best designers. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't, but they're two completely different skill sets. So I think if you want to be a better designer, I don't know, take a course or work for someone you admire. If you want to be a better person at getting clients, I would say the same. Work for someone that you admire and watch the way they interact with people, or get a mentor who you think is very good at it, and just, listen to Dezeen talks like this. And watch the way they behave and try to tune into a lot of the stuff that they do.
A lot of companies, they have people whose job it is to get leads. You do that. It seems like you do most of that in your company. Is that true? Would that be fair to say? That
I wish I could change that. I'm kidding. Everybody in the company has a role, and we're a lean team. So of course, I welcome people that bring in work, and we, we're very happy to do that. A lot of times people are busy with their own jobs. If they're like project managing or they're operational, it becomes tough to then wear multiple hats. So we don't force it, although it's obviously highly encouraged. And then I also found out, and I had no idea this existed, you can actually hire external BD companies to come in and help you find work. So one of them is called Future Factories, a great CEO there. And they basically cold call any sector that you want to get into. And they ask to meet they're actually called the technical directors, even though this actually means the person that chooses the designers. And this is for the hospitality world. So they'll call these hospitality operational people, and they'll ask them who the technical director is, and then they'll set up a meeting between you and those people as cold calls. So that's another way to do it.
One of the interesting things about this coronavirus situation is that I've become more client-facing again, because I, for the last few years, have always handed that on to someone else. But this is no time for that now. So I've been negotiating with people, and I must say, I enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that
closing a deal.
It feels good to close a deal. I love that feeling. It's amazing. And I think that people really appreciate talking like owner to owner about something, because they have the same empathies of business running and understand operations and resourcing. And I actually think that that's probably been really successful on your end to be able to, me as well. What's funny is I usually don't get into the design of things because I'm too busy doing like more the administration things and like business development and the PR and the marketing side. And for the first time with COVID, because I have all this, extra time that I'm not traveling, I'm catting and I'm doing the rhino models, and I'm like photoshopping my own design, and it feels really good. I love it. And I love that like we have these skill sets that don't disappear, and we can just pick it right back up, like getting on a bicycle, you know. It's been really nice.
And then we have a question from Goethe, who asks, where do you get your inspiration?
Oh, I get it from, I get a lot of it from nature. And this is not like this is not a bullshit answer. But I'm really into this idea of sculpture and form work. And I love like organic forms. I really hate like very structured things. And so I get a lot of this inspiration from that. So we had the teardrop is the most successful light, but we have a whole range. So some of them were like blobs of vegetables. Some of them were acts of nature. And I really love kind of raw unfinished things like stones. So like raw unfinished stones, raw unfinished woods. I love pairing up these odd materials. And so it's funny because when we started looking at our products line or our furniture range, that's all it is. It's a bunch of kind of mix of materials and blobs and forms. And it was the first time that I could design something without like a specific client in mind. So yeah, I get it a lot from nature.
Okay, well, it's great to see you again, albeit through a screen and albeit with a few technical hitches. Also, for some reason, I've had people trying to phone me the whole time, mostly my technical guy about fixing my laptop.
The copy you spilled on it.
Distracting of all the talks we've done.
Amazing.
Well, we got through it, and thanks so much. Great to see you, and hope to see you back on the road before too long.
Oh my goodness, I can't wait. Thank you so much, Marcus. I had lots of fun.
See you soon.